Mark Cousins, the philosopher who redefined architectural thinking. Architectural Legends by Arcland Pro. Intro. The voice that changed architecture. Imagine walking into a lecture hall on a grey London morning. There are no drawings pinned on the wall, no plans projected on the screen. Just silence, and then, a quiet voice begins to speak. Not about form, not about function, but about desire, power, the body, the city. That voice belongs to Mark Cousins, one of the most captivating minds ever to shape architectural thought. He never built a single building. He never called himself an architect. Yet he changed how every architect since thinks about what they build, and why. This is not the story of an architect. It's the story of a philosopher who made architects think. This is Mark Cousins, and this is Architectural Legends by Arcland Pro. Part 1. The Early Years, From Philosophy to Architecture. Mark Cousins was born in Oxford in 1947. He studied philosophy, literature, and psychoanalysis, disciplines that would later weave themselves into his vision of architecture. He wasn't fascinated by walls or facades, but by the invisible structures that shape our world, ideas, language, and emotions. When he first encountered architecture, it wasn't through blueprints or models, but through the human condition. He often asked, "What does a building want from us, and what do we want from it?" These weren't typical architectural questions, and that's exactly what made Cousins different. In the late 1970s, he joined the Architectural Association School of Architecture, AA, in London, one of the most radical schools in the world at the time. The AA wasn't just a school, it was a cultural engine, where ideas collided, art, philosophy, politics, and design blended into one. And soon, Cousins became its heartbeat. Part 2. The AA Revolution. Architecture as Thought. The AA in the 1980s was like no other place. Students came from around the world, restless, ambitious, hungry for something more than form and function. At the center of this storm stood Mark Cousins, tall, composed, dressed in black, speaking with precision and patience. Every Friday, Room 36 transformed into something sacred. Hundreds of students would sit in silence, waiting for his voice. No slides, no visuals. Just words. He would begin slowly, talking about Freud's notion of the unconscious, or Derrida's theory of deconstruction. And somehow, without you realizing, you'd find yourself thinking about cities, about windows, about how the placement of a door could express anxiety or power. His lectures were described as cinematic, unfolding like films, filled with tension, rhythm, and revelation. He didn't teach architecture, he taught how to think. He made students question everything, from why buildings exist, to what they say about us as humans. Part 3. The Intellectual Climate. Friends, Foes, and Ideas. Cousins became part of a powerful intellectual movement in London, one that merged architecture with philosophy, critical theory, and psychoanalysis. He worked closely with thinkers like Catherine Ingram, Nigel Coates, and Patrick Schumacher, who later became key figures in contemporary design discourse. He also collaborated with AA tutors like Alvin Boyarsky, the visionary director who transformed the school into a global hub of experimentation. But unlike others, Cousins never chased fame or published flashy manifestos. He wasn't interested in building monuments, he was interested in building ideas. His lectures became mythic among architecture students. People who heard him once remembered it for life. He could speak for an hour about a window, and make it feel like a portal into human psychology. Part 4. The Body, the City, and the Unconscious. Cousins was deeply influenced by psychoanalysis, especially Freud and Lacan. He believed architecture was not just about objects in space, but about the body's experience of space and how desire shapes our built environment. He often explored how buildings frame our emotions, how a corridor might create suspense, or how a door might suggest invitation or exclusion. He once said, "Architecture doesn't just shelter us, it positions us, socially, psychologically, even erotically." For Cousins, the city was like a body, with its own organs, desires, and pathologies. He believed that by studying the city, we could understand ourselves, our fears, our hopes, our need for control and order. This human-centered approach redefined the meaning of theory. It wasn't abstract anymore, it was intimate. It was about how we live, move, and feel within the spaces we create. Part 5. Architecture as a language. One of Cousins' most influential ideas was that architecture is a form of language. Not a language made of words, but of walls, light, and rhythm. He often compared architects to writers or poets, who speak through materials instead of sentences. He said, "Every building is a statement, every city is a conversation." In this sense, architects are translators, interpreting culture, politics, and memory into spatial form. And just like language, architecture could be honest or manipulative, beautiful or violent. It could reveal or conceal. It could heal or divide. This linguistic view of architecture inspired countless designers to see their work differently, not as decoration, but as communication. Part 6. The theory of the image. Cousins was fascinated by images, but not in the visual sense alone. He saw images as mental constructs, what we imagine, project, and remember. In his lectures, he explored how architecture lives in the imagination long before it's ever built. He argued that our mental image of a space can be more powerful than the physical space itself. This led him to study film and architecture, how cinematic techniques like framing, scale, and movement mirror architectural experience. For Cousins, architecture was always narrative. Every wall told a story. Every threshold marked a transition, not just in space, but in emotion. Part 7. Teaching as art. Mark Cousins wasn't just a lecturer. He was a performer of ideas. He understood rhythm, when to pause, when to provoke, when to whisper. His lectures weren't about memorizing theory, they were about feeling it. Students described him as magnetic. You could sit for 2 hours, without notes, and walk out seeing architecture, and the world, differently. He believed that education should not fill your head with information, but ignite your curiosity. And that's exactly what he did. Many architects who later became global figures, from Zaha Hadid's generation to emerging thinkers today, trace part of their intellectual DNA back to Cousins. He didn't give them answers. He gave them questions that lasted a lifetime. Part 8. Legacy and passing. Mark Cousins passed away in 2020, leaving behind not a portfolio of buildings, but a legacy of minds. He transformed what it means to teach architecture, to think of it not as a craft of building, but as a philosophy of living. The Architectural Association mourned his passing deeply. Former students described him as the soul of the awe. His influence continues through generations of architects who never met him, but who live within the ideas he sparked. In an age obsessed with speed, visuals, and surface, Cousins reminded us of something timeless, that architecture begins with reflection. Before you draw, you must think. Before you design, you must question. And only then can architecture become more than a structure, it can become a statement about who we are. Outro. A tribute to thought. Mark Cousins may never have drawn a single building, but he built something far more enduring, a bridge between philosophy and architecture, between thinking and making. He proved that architecture is not just about form or function, it's about meaning. He helped generations of architects see that to design a building, you must first design a way of thinking. This episode of Architectural Legends by Arcland Pro is dedicated to the philosopher who gave architecture its mind. If you believe that great architecture begins with great ideas, subscribe to Arcland Pro, and stay with us as we explore more of the minds that built our world. And tell us in the comments, which architectural thinker should we feature next?